Well, let's bring on Noah Malgeri, former Army officer and Republican congressional candidate in Nevada, and John Sitilides, geopolitical strategist and trilogy advisors. Thanks for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
John, I want to start with you. Just because the Chinese have actually had a successful test, does that mean the technology is actually ready to be used tomorrow?
It's not. The Chinese are involved in a series of tests that go back several years, as does the United States, which actually has been testing for about 15 years, although that's much been ramped up in recent years, both by Raytheon and, frankly, by Lockheed Martin, which I think currently has about 6 different hypersonic missile programs underway and expects to be able to produce hypersonic missiles by between 2023 and 2026. And of course, Russia really gave the world this technology starting in the late 1950s and early 1960s before dropping it for a number of years and restarting the current hypersonic missile testing process in 2018. So what China has right now is part of a series of tests, but no one is actually deploying hypersonic missiles yet. This is still a nascent technology, but it is going to be probably one of the major drivers of a global nuclear and conventional arms race between Russia, China, and the United States for a number of years to come.
And that's probably why the conversation is happening today, is because of what could happen in the future. So, Noah, what do we know does the United States actually have to defend itself against any form of a hypersonic missile in the future? Are we in the development phases?
Well, I don't know if we can do that today. I mean, conventional forms of defense might present a good platform to evolve and refine to try to come up with something that is able to grapple with the challenges of the maneuverability, unpredictability, speeds of these next generation missiles that are kind of an interesting hybrid between some of the characteristics of a ICBM ballistic missile as well as a cruise missile. And I think, we don't think it can really reliably take that out mid-course, perhaps in the terminal phase when they slow down. I think next generation laser deterrence and countermeasures that the United States has been developing in combination with some anti-missile detection technology from other applications might be able to combine to come up with something. An optical-based, a laser-based defense might work. But the real question, the practical question, I suppose, is, you're able. First of all, there's just not a proliferation of these weapons where they could that any of China or Russia at this stage could present a mass strike with these. So what we did in terms of a release, because they just don't exist. They're large numbers. They're highly expensive. They're still very in developmental phase. There hasn't, we don't know what type of warheads they're capable of deploying. And so we're not at the stage yet of an emergency situation. Just simply, there's just not enough of them to present a formidable threat. And we have some time to come up, with a deterrent or a countermeasure. The other thing we ought to do as a countermeasure or deterrent is come up with equally robust offensive technology that presents a deterrence in terms of mutually assured release, having a deterrent effect, which we're accustomed to having lived through the Cold War.
And I hear what you're saying.
Best defense is really
right, but I hear what you're saying. How we're still in the early developments, and yet I want to throw it back to John on this one, because China just within the last few hours has launched a satellite-crushing weapon, and President Xi's actually come out and said that he vows to continue this arms development, obviously at a very accelerated pace. So are the Chinese already preparing to crush any defense put up against them, whether it be here at home or, more importantly, they're prepared for in the sky? It sounds like.
It's a very important development that you're detailing here, Scotty, and this is supposedly a space debris monitoring device that China has put up. But we've come to learn that China is supremely adept at deception on a global scale. And they also have what we know as civil-military fusion, where anything that has civil applications is immediately applied to military applications, including in violations of international agreements that the Chinese Communist Party has signed on to, including looking to see to what extent we can keep weaponization of space to a minimum, if not to an absolute zero to the extent possible. But these debris monitoring satellites can also be used to literally grapple and crush U.S. satellites and those of our European allies and other allies around the world. And so we do see now an escalation of the weaponization of the space program through these Chinese activities. And it really is part of China's larger unrestricted warfare against the United States and against the global West, where they really don't see themselves bound by any of the conventional norms or agreements that the U.S. and other countries abide by.
Well, and that's interesting that you bring that up, because it's a great segue for me to throw it back over to John on this one, because in the end, it comes down to how did the different cultures approach war? That's been the problem throughout time. You know, some people say they fight that there's standards of war, there's fight, but then others say, you know what, when on the battlefield, there are no rules. So John, Noah, how do the Chinese view warfare versus the United States and other Western countries view warfare? Noah.
Yeah, we're seeing it in real time today. We're seeing it in real time today played out. You know, Sun Tzu, famous Chinese general, said that supremacy in warfare is to your opponent without firing a shot, right? So we're experiencing that globally, especially. John is 100% correct. So their ambitions are belligerent. They are setting the stage, setting to, as they say, reunify Taiwan. You know, they've now got Afghanistan, which they have a 47-mile border with. They will, the South China, they will go, you know, as far as they can to the Philippines, ultimately Australia if they can. But their ambitions globally are now they find themselves in kind of the ebb and flow of power with their natural adversaries, the Western United States-led coalition of free or representational democracies, as opposed to the Marxist one-party state of China and the emerging global superpower of the Chinese Communist Party, the empire. They're on the march now because we are relatively weak in the West, both economically, militarily. But another thing that they pay close attention to and that they target specifically is to try to weaken the population of countries to prepare the battlefield, in a sense, to foment civil unrest, to create political strife, to basically sow mischief civilly as much as possible behind the scenes in education system, media, entertainment, whatever they can do to weaken the resolve and the unity of a country as well. So now they're at a point right now where they are relatively strong compared to the West. And it's a scary time. They basically came out and said that it's inevitable that they're going to go after Taiwan. And the question is, how will the West respond?
And that is, I think, a question that we're looking for answers for probably, hopefully, sooner rather than later. Noah, John, great to talk with you. Thank you for your insight.